All right, welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Sorry for the break, everyone. It was a mix of the holidays and a bunch of work hitting me all at once and getting sick. As you may hear, I'm still a little bit congested. But I'm going to show you something a little bit interesting today. And that is a crafting video. Yes, a crafting video. I'm not normally a crafter. It's not my expertise. I don't have a ton of those sorts of tools. But I do want a couple of basic things for my tabletop. And the main thing is that I wanted to do dungeon setups, right, using physical objects rather than just doing theater of the mind dungeon exploration. And my main reason for that is I like the tactics of knowing exactly where the next passage is, how much room I have in this cavern, can I get back to this alcove in time, and things like that. And that's a little bit hard to really emulate in just theater of the mind. So I wanted a dungeon setup, and I went through a couple different options. So the first thing I tried was just using foam core like this. So this is black foam core. It's really cheap, costs practically nothing. It's easy to cut. You can just cut it with an X-Acto knife. And I just used some gold, like a gold paint marker, to mark some 1-inch squares. And I figured I could just use this as the different rooms and passages of the dungeon. So I could have this, and then you might have another passage, and you could just sort of, link them up like that, and so on and so forth, and you could just create a dungeon that way. And that works perfectly well. This is probably the cheapest way to set up a physical dungeon where you can easily modularly put it together, right? If you don't have a big battle map that you want to draw on. I like having a modular dungeon that I can rearrange at will. But when it came down to it, I actually wanted walls. I wanted it to be more three-dimensional. And I wasn't crazy about the way that I was kind of limited. You can create lots of different shapes with this, right? You can create lots of different room sizes, but you're not going to be able to create everything that you want. And you're not going to be able to create new rooms and new shapes on the fly. At least that's going to be more difficult. So what I ended up going with was a more wall-based system where I just wanted to create walls. And if I just had walls that could stand up, then I could easily rearrange them at will and just create any size or shape of room that I wanted. So the next thing I tried was still using foam core. I tried to put little ledges on the bottom of these, which works okay, right? It stands up, but it's pretty wobbly. A slight breeze will just knock them over. So that experiment didn't go too well. And what I finally settled on was pink foam. So here's a block of pink foam right here. So you can get this stuff at Home Depot for dirt cheap. It's just dense foam insulation, basically. You can get a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of it for $18. So you can get huge amounts of it. And I went with a 1-inch thick because it stands up, right? If you cut it like that. And these big sheets actually snap off. You can snap them off by hand into these 8-inch wide strips. And that was perfect because I wanted all of my walls to be in 8-inch increments, because I could do 8 inches, 6 inches, 4 inches, and 2 inches and have a variety of wall lengths, and then I could just rearrange them however I wanted. So here's a bunch here. I can very easily just slap these down like so and create, a dungeon setup. Right? It's easy to do. And because they're 1 inch wide, then they would fit right onto a battle map that was built out of 1-inch squares. And it'd be really easy to rearrange, really easy to use. They're very light, they're very sturdy, and because they're 1 inch wide, they stand up. Now, I just cut these out of the big sheet using an X-Acto knife, just a big craft knife like this one, right? That's all you really need. The main trick is to cut at an angle, like so. You don't want to cut straight down or straight across. The more of an angle you get as you cut through the foam, the better of a cut you'll get. You will get less of this. Right? It's kind of wrinkly. That's because I wasn't cutting it properly. But you can get some nice straight edges like this one if you just cut at an angle and you just pull it straight through. Now, if you have a hot wire cutter, that stuff will work even better. It'll cut through it like butter. You'll get very straight edges. But frankly, this works perfectly fine. For the most part, my edges are straight enough that the walls stand up. They're not terribly wobbly. It's perfectly good for me. This is a very quick and dirty way of making dungeon walls, I should say. I don't have like a ton of materials or expertise, as I said before, but it works well enough for me, and it looks pretty good once I finished it. So I wasn't finished with this. This can work, of course, except if you want all of your walls to be pink, but I wanted a bit more detail. So what I found was something pretty awesome. Let me show you here. I found these. So these are acrylic rollers. They have texture on them. And they're mostly designed for use with Super Sculpey or some sort of putty. And you can easily create like a brick work pattern. So this is a brick one. And then I also have one for cobblestone and one for like flagstones. It's like what you would see in pavement. And I discovered these on Green Stuff World, which is a website, and they very generously sent me these review copies to look at. So I'm going to show you how they work and why they work really well with this wall setup. It saved me a huge amount of time. So basically what I did is you just take one of your pieces, like so, and you can just texture it. Now, notice that this is the machined side. This is the flat side that it just came with, and this is like a cut side that I made. It works better on the sides that have already been cut than on the sides that have been machined. However, it's very close to being exactly the same, and I don't really see much of a problem there. So you can just hold it down like that. Then you simply press down. You can feel it crinkling a little bit, but that's fine. And you roll it across. Try and keep a nice even pressure. There you go. It looks like this brick pattern. It repeats eventually, but especially for smaller pieces, it looks perfectly good. In fact, it looks great. It's way better than something I could make by hand. Let's look at some of the other patterns here. So we got our cobblestone, for example. I'll do this along the top so you can see that the impression looks a little bit different. It's a little bit sharper. I think it just pushes into the material a little bit more cleanly. And then on this side, let's do the pavement. So this is the type of pavement you might use for like a medieval city. There you go. Looks like little cobblestones. So you can use whichever side you want, but for dungeon walls, I definitely went with the brick texture because it looks the most like the type of stones you would see layered in the wall of a dungeon. And of course, these are good for the texture of the floor if you wanted to create floor tiles as well, right? In fact, I would probably use these cobblestone ones for the floor and then this for the walls. However, I'm just making walls. That's all I really need. So once you have that set up, it's time to start painting. And you can go into as much detail as you want with this. I didn't go into a lot of detail, mostly because I'm making a ton of these walls and I don't have enough time to just do that much detail. But first what you want to do is just do a black base coat. All right, so jumping ahead a little bit, here's that piece again, but with my black base coat that I want to start with. I'm using whatever acrylic paint. I'm using this craft paint I got from the craft store. It doesn't really matter as long as it lays down a nice even coat. So once I have this, my next step is going to be adding the highlights because the little cracks are indented into this. So if I just do some dry brushing, then it should just cover the stones that are now sticking out and cause them to pop out. Now originally I tried doing this with gray paint, but because I'm laying the paint on so thin, laying gray on this just washes it out and you can't really see anything. So I'm going to use white because it ends up looking like a light gray once you layer it on here. Right? So, and I used a brush for this originally, but I discovered that this is actually much, much better because it's wide and flat and you can lay it on a whole lot at a time. Using just a little dry brush to do this tends to take a long time, but you know, whatever technique works for you. So let's just get a little bit of white paint here. It's going to be a little bit tricky to find exactly the right amount to get onto your brush. I'm just going to get a little bit on here. So I'm just getting it on the edge of this thing. All right, so just a little line on the edge. And then I'm going to use like a paper towel here to try and like get a lot of that excess off, because I don't want it to be wet. I just want it to be able to be brushed on. So I'm going to use like long, fast strokes so I just get the top highlights. I'm going to use that corner there that I got a little bit of paint on. And you add a little bit more pressure as you need to. You can see that it's starting to work. And those bricks are starting to pop out. Right? And you can add as much or as little as you might need. So you can add more to create a make the bricks lighter, or less to make them a little bit darker. Just gonna add a tiny bit more here. Again, try and get a lot of the wet paint off so that it is fairly dry, because you are dry brushing here. And then you can just work it however you want until you're satisfied. That's basically all you need to do. I think this looks fantastic. I'll show you a bigger one that I did here. So here's a bigger piece. And I laid it on a little bit more thickly here so the bricks popped out a little bit more. So you can just add layer after layer, or just make the white a little bit wetter, and then just try and really get those bricks to pop. Now the cool thing is that, for example, on the back here I kind of screwed up. I had a little too much white, and you can see it kind of melded together and filled in some of those black spots. The cool thing is, it doesn't really matter. This still looks perfectly fine. In fact, it just looks like the wall is older and more corroded. So it really doesn't make that big of a difference. You can just put it on the table and you're not really going to notice the difference either way. In fact, it could look kind of cool. And then I just do this, I texture all of the sides and then I go all the way around. That way I can orient it however I want and it's good to go. So that's how I'm doing dungeon walls. If you really want to spruce it up a little bit more, you can do something like adding a little bit of other colors, like a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, and then it adds some like fungal texture to it, or maybe some mud, and that can really spruce things up a little bit, I think. Let me show you an example. So here's an example of what I was talking about. I think it's a pretty good effect, and it's really easy to do. You just dry brush that color on. Just get a couple more craft paints. And of course, you can tailor this based on the type of dungeon you're creating. For example, if you created a lot of green colors and a lot of darker greens especially, you could create a very oozy type of dungeon where there's a lot of moss and slime on the walls. I think it'd be fairly simple to do. Anyway, that's my video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I especially recommend checking out these rollers from Green Stuff World. I will put a link in the description below to where you can pick them up, along with a coupon code where you can get them for a little bit cheaper. So be sure to check that out. They're a great investment. They're not terribly expensive, and you can use them over and over and over hundreds of times to really crank out some really awesome, simple terrain. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and leave a comment below. And make sure to check out my Patreon if you'd like to support me making videos like this one. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you guys later.